You are listening to the Pregnancy Podcast with Vanessa Merton.
Hello, thank you for tuning into the Pregnancy Podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about crafting your birth plan. Your birth plan is a document that's going to outline your preferences for labor and what happens directly following the birth of your baby. But this is so much more than just a piece of paper that you hand to your doctor or midwife. Crafting your birth plan is the process that you go through to prepare for the birth experience you want. When it's done right, it's going to lay the foundation to prepare you for the scenario in which everything goes exactly as planned, and for what should happen in the event things don't go that way. The value of a birth plan has so much more to do with the process of creating it than it really does with the finished product. Following this simple process that we're going to go through in today's episode will empower you to confidently navigate your labor and birth. We're going to talk about when in your pregnancy you need to be working on your birth plan. I'm going to go through 10 steps to create it. We're going to talk about why you should have a backup plan and what alternative scenarios you should plan for. And I'm going to cover some frequently asked questions that I get a lot, having helped thousands of expecting parents create a birth plan. You can find the complete article, all of the resources for this episode, a list of the 10 steps. Everything is at pregnancypodcast.com/plan. You're on the public feed of the podcast, which means you get the most recent year of episodes and you hear ads. Today's episode, we're talking about creating your birth plan. If you want extra support, Pregnancy Podcast Premium gives you instant access to the Your Birth Plan book that walks you through your options, includes sample birth plans, and gives you a downloadable template that you can customize. Premium members also get the full back catalog of episodes in a private ad-free feed, so you can binge on all the topics that matter to you, like pain management, interventions, and cesarean birth. If you are deciding what you want in your birth plan, there's likely a premium episode that breaks down the evidence. Check it out at pregnancypodcast.com/premium. 8 Sheep Organics makes amazing 100% clean, natural pregnancy products. From skincare to treating common symptoms like stretch marks with clinically proven ingredients, 8 Sheep Organics has you covered. And every product comes with a 100-day happiness guarantee. Try it risk-free, and if you're not 100% happy with your purchase, simply send them an email and they'll get you a refund, no questions asked. Check out 8 Sheep Organics and save 10% when you go to pregnancypodcast.com/8sheep. That's the number 8 and sheep like the animal. 8 sheep. So when should you be working on your birth plan? You really start creating your birth plan the minute that you start educating yourself about labor and birth. This is a work in progress throughout your entire pregnancy. Every prenatal appointment that you go to is an opportunity to talk about some aspect of the labor and birth experience that you want. And as you go, your plan may evolve. As you learn more, as you find out about other options, ideally, you finish your birth plan by the end of week 36. That way, you're not scrambling to get it done at the last minute, and you are completely ready if you go into labor a few weeks early. And remember, you can always make changes or revise it until you go into labor. But ideally, you want it done by the end of week 36. So let's start with the 10 simple steps to creating and writing your birth plan. Step 1 is get educated. To make an informed decision about anything, you need to educate yourself and know your options. Education about birth is going to come from different resources, listening to the Pregnancy Podcast. You may be reading books, you could be researching online, and of course, talking to your doctor or midwife. Please utilize your visits with your care provider to learn about aspects of labor and birth. And even if you're just in week 10 right now, if you have a question about labor, you can bring it up now. You don't have to save those questions till the end of your pregnancy. Your care provider is an expert resource, and you should be taking advantage of any time you get with them face to face. Also, the Pregnancy Podcast has episodes that examine the evidence on every intervention during labor and birth. A good way to browse through those episodes is to check out the episode guide. You can find that at pregnancypodcast.com/guide. So step 1 is to just get educated and start informing yourself about your options. Step 2 is to make a list of everything that you want to include for your labor, your birth, and your baby. You can use a pen and paper. You can do this in a note app on your phone. You can pull up a Word doc on your computer. The point is you want to start putting down the things that are important to you and that you know you want to include in your plan. At this stage, don't worry about details. The goal is just to have everything that comes to mind documented in one place. So after you've made a list, you need to find out the policies and procedures that you need to work with. Your care provider or the venue where you're planning to have your baby will have policies and procedures in place that are going to affect your labor and birth options. If there are conflicts between policies and your requests, you want to know upfront so you can plan accordingly. One example of this is that some states mandate the use of erythromycin eye ointment for newborns. So if you live in a state that requires erythromycin, you may not be able to opt out of this procedure. But you want to know that upfront. You don't want to find that out if you've stated in your plan that you want to decline erythromycin, and then your doctor is going to inform you that it's mandated by your state. As you're working with your care provider throughout your pregnancy, you're going to learn about policies and practices that you need to take into account. I know it can be frustrating to have to alter your requests, but the best time to make changes to your birth plan is well before you're into labor. So although these can be frustrating, you definitely want to know about them ahead of time. Step 4, you're going to create your first draft. So to do this, you need to write out your preferences in an organized format. Typically, you're going to write your birth plan as a letter that's addressed to your doctor, your midwife, or hospital or birth center staff. It's really crucial that you craft your plan in a respectful tone. You do not want this to come off as a list of demands. And this is going to be really helpful when you provide copies to staff who you may not already have an existing relationship with. An example of crafting your plan in a respectful tone, let's say, for example, that you would like to avoid a cesarean birth, that you are planning on a vaginal birth. To make that clear in your birth plan, you could state, I plan a vaginal birth and I do not want a C-section. An alternative way to state that could be, I would like to exhaust all options for a successful vaginal birth before resorting to a cesarean. If you want to see a sample of how a birth plan could be structured or worded, you can get a free copy of the birth plan that I used for my son's birth. Although my preferences might not be right for you, you can use this as an example of how yours could be structured or worded. You can request a free copy of that at pregnancypodcast.com/birthplan. As you're working on your first draft, if you have a preference that's in line with your care provider's routine practice, you may be able to take it out of your birth plan. For example, if your doctor routinely uses continuous electronic fetal monitoring and you're comfortable with that, you don't need to include anything about it. On the other hand, if you want to do something that's outside of your care provider's routine practice, you may want to leave it in to make sure that they know your preference. So using that same example with electronic fetal monitoring, if you prefer intermittent instead of continuous monitoring, that may be something that you want to leave in your birth plan. Remember, as you're creating this draft, your first draft is a draft. So don't worry about making it perfect the first time around. You're going to have an opportunity to edit it and make changes as you complete the step-by-step process. Once you have your first draft, step 5 is to check for conflicts. You want to read through it and you want to look for any conflicting requests. You want to make sure that everything makes sense and that all of the pieces fit together. For example, you may not be able to avoid IV fluids if you're choosing to have your labor induced with Pitocin. Or if you're planning to delay the clamping of your baby's umbilical cord, you may not also be able to bank cord blood. Of course, knowing which interventions can conflict with each other comes from knowing your options and how one intervention could affect another. And again, if you have a question on a specific intervention, there is a podcast episode that covers that topic. So it's important after you have your first draft that you make sure everything in your plan works together. Next, step 6 is to review your plan with your partner. Whether or not they've been involved in the process up to this point, they can be an excellent sounding board. You want to ask them if it makes sense and if there's anything that's important to them that you're leaving out. Your partner plays a significant role in your birth. So having them read through your birth plan, getting their feedback is a great way to get them involved. Your partner can really be an invaluable advocate for you during labor. But they can only be an effective advocate if they know your birth plan and they understand your requests. So step 6 is review your plan with your partner. Next, step 7 is to discuss your birth plan with your care provider. So at this point, you should have a solid draft of your birth plan. Next, you want to talk to your doctor or midwife. This step is mandatory. And this is in addition to working with your care provider throughout the planning process. The number one reason that birth plans fail is that expecting parents do not involve their care provider. Your doctor or midwife is an excellent resource to pinpoint problems with your plan or to point out conflicts that they see as a potential issue. If there is anything that you are not 100% clear on about your birth, now is the time to bring it up while you're still pregnant, not while you're in labor. So make sure that your care provider is clear on what you want and that they support your wishes. If there's anything that you and your doctor or midwife don't see eye to eye on, talk about it. If you have concerns, bring those concerns up. You and your care provider are on the same team, but you have to know you will not get the birth experience you want if you plan it without them. So step 7 is that you have to review your birth plan with your care provider. Next up, step 8 is final edits. The goal is to have a brief, well thought out plan that is clear, easy to read, and free from any typos. An essential part of this step is editing your birth plan to a maximum of 1 page printed on one side. And to do this, I do not recommend decreasing the font size or reducing the margins. And I'll talk a little bit more about that 1-page birth plan at the end of this episode when I go through some frequently asked questions. Once your final draft is complete, you're ready for step 9, which is that you need to know your birth plan inside and out. Understanding interventions and your preferences does a couple things. It's going to allow you to be confident in your decisions. It's also going to prepare you for what to expect. You should have a pretty thorough understanding of every item in your plan and why you included it. And this is also true for your partner. They need to know your plan well in order to advocate for you. If you're working with a doula, they should have a copy of it and they should be supportive of your choices. You don't have to memorize your birth plan word for word, but you should know precisely what you want and what you do not want. So you need to know it inside and out. Step 10, and the last step in this process, is to have your birth plan ready. So you want to save it and have it accessible via email in the event you want to forward it to anyone electronically. You should provide your partner with a copy. If you have a doula, make sure they have a copy of it. I recommend printing out several copies and packing them in your hospital or birth center bag. Or if you're having a home birth, make sure you have them on hand. If during labor you have a new nurse or doctor or someone of the medical staff that's meeting you, you want to let them know that you have a birth plan and get them a copy to review. So I recommend having some extra copies with you. At the end of this process, you're going to have a concise sheet of paper with all your requests. But it's really all the work that you did leading up to that final printed piece of paper that's going to set you up for success. Some of these 10 steps are going to take less time than others, but I really encourage you to go through these in order and not skip any steps in this process. If you're listening to this episode in the car or on a walk, don't worry about taking notes. You can find a list of the 10 steps, a full transcript, links to all the resources. Everything is at pregnancypodcast.com/plan. Next, we're going to talk about why you should have a backup plan, how to create that, and also go through some frequently asked questions that I get a lot in helping thousands of expecting parents craft a birth plan. Before we do that, I want to thank the sponsors that have supported this episode. A lot of companies have exclusive discounts for Pregnancy Podcast listeners. You can always see current promo codes at pregnancypodcast.com/resources. As you are preparing to welcome a new baby, you're probably already imagining what bedtime will look like with your growing family. Some nights will be calm and cozy, and other nights, maybe not so much. If you want to make bedtime easier and add a little magic to the end of the day, there's a podcast you will love called Wink Stories for Better Bedtimes. Wink is a collection of bedtime stories designed to help your little one relax and create calming, mindful moments of connection at bedtime for you and your child. There are no ads, no interruptions, and each episode is just 15 minutes or less. The stories are sensory aware, which means they help calm restless bodies and encourage interaction between you and your little one. I've been listening to Wink bedtime stories with my kids. These stories are genuinely fun. Think friendly monsters, funny animals, and little adventures to listen to together. It's time to discover a better bedtime. Subscribe to Wink Stories for Better Bedtimes wherever you listen to podcasts. AG1 is the daily health drink that combines your multivitamin, pre- and probiotics, superfoods, and antioxidants into one simple green scoop. It's one of the easiest things you can do to support your body every day. AG1 goes to great lengths to continually invest in rigorous peer-reviewed clinical trials. And you know how much I love research. Plus, AG1 goes above and beyond to test for hundreds of contaminants and impurities to guarantee that they deliver the highest quality nutrients available. I've been starting every single morning with AG1 for years. I love the peace of mind knowing I'm covering all of the key nutrients my body needs, plus supporting my microbiome, metabolism, and immune system. And this time of year, it is more important than ever to be proactive about supporting your immune health. Head to drinkag1.com/pregnancypodcast. And when you first subscribe to AG1, you'll get an AG1 welcome kit, a bottle of vitamin D3K2, a morning person hat, and you'll get to try each new flavor of AG1 and their new sleep supplement, AGZ. That's $126 in free gifts for new subscribers. Go to drinkag1.com/pregnancypodcast. As a friendly reminder, pregnant or nursing women should seek professional medical advice before taking this or any other dietary supplement. Let's get back to today's episode. Should you plan for the birth that you want? Absolutely. But should you also have a backup plan? Yes, you should. Labor is an intense experience, and a lot of things can require quick decisions or can change the trajectory of your birth plan. During labor, there may not be adequate time for your doctor or your midwife to educate you about all of your options and get in depth about the pros and cons of each procedure. Creating a backup plan is going to allow you to educate yourself ahead of time and make informed decisions for alternate birth scenarios. By creating a backup plan, you're not going to be caught off guard if circumstances come up that change the course of your birth plan. Depending on what your ideal birth plan is, there are several circumstances that you may want to explore when you're creating your backup plan. First, changing preferences for interventions. In the course of your labor, you might change your mind on the interventions that you're opting in or out of. As an example, if you plan an unmedicated birth, you may decide that you want an epidural or another pain management option. Whether you're planning on intermittent or continuous electronic fetal monitoring, you should know about both. Plus, remember, educating yourself about these procedures ahead of time is going to give you a lot more confidence if you're discussing them with your doctor or midwife, especially in a scenario when quick decisions are needed. And you can always change your preferences and deviate from your birth plan during labor. You should never feel obligated to stick with your plan if there's something in it that you want to change. Every expecting mother should be knowledgeable about cesarean birth, even if that is not your plan. The overall cesarean birth rate in the United States is 32.3%. Of course, some of those mothers that have their baby via cesarean are at high risk. They require a cesarean for medical reasons. There's some mothers that may schedule an elective cesarean. If you just take a look at low-risk pregnancies, so to exclude everyone in that high-risk category, a low-risk pregnancy is defined as a baby who is 37 weeks or more, singleton, so it's not twins or multiples, the baby is head down, and it's the mother's first pregnancy. Just looking at low-risk pregnancies, the rate is just over 1 in 4 births at 26.6%. What I'm getting at here is that the rate of cesareans is very high, even if you're considered low risk. And this is something that every mother should have some knowledge about. One study that examined over 38,000 cesareans found the biggest reason for a cesarean was failure to progress. 35.4% of mothers in this study had a cesarean because labor was just not progressing. The next most common reason for a cesarean was non-reassuring fetal heart rate. That accounted for 27.3%. Looking at this data, 62% of women who had a C-section in this study did not go into labor planning a cesarean. They went into labor planning for a vaginal birth. Having a backup plan for a cesarean birth will make the difference between navigating a cesarean with confidence or feeling completely overwhelmed and like everything is out of your control and you're not getting the birth experience you want. The good news is you have a lot of options in a cesarean. Of course, that only applies if you know what those options are. There's a couple of episodes on the podcast. There's one on what to expect in a cesarean birth, and another on options to make a cesarean more mom and baby friendly. And I'll link to both of those episodes. Another scenario to consider for a backup birth plan is changing venues. If you're planning for a home or birth center birth, you need a backup plan in the event you transfer to a hospital. Remember, the majority of these transfers are not emergency 911 calls. You may decide that you want an epidural because you just need to rest and you're exhausted, or something may come up that makes your midwife recommend that you transfer to a hospital. When you're exploring the possibility of a transfer to a hospital, there's a couple questions that will be helpful. These will also help in creating your backup plan. One is, what hospital would you transfer to? And if your preferred hospital is not the nearest, you should also know where the nearest facility is in the event you needed to transfer quickly. And if possible, it would be nice to have a doctor that you know your care would be transferred to. Some birth centers and home birth midwives will have OBGYNs that they work with regularly in the event of a transfer. I would check with your midwife and find out if they can assist in connecting you with an OBGYN. Another question you should be asking yourself is who can accompany you to the hospital. Hospitals tend to have much more strict policies on who can be with you during labor. Your partner, of course, should be by your side, but your midwife, doula, other people may not be able to accompany you. You should know whether your midwife can accompany you or what capacity they can continue to care for you. This all depends on your circumstances and the laws where you live. Some midwives will be able to stay with you in the capacity of a doula. Others would have to hand over your care completely. So ask your midwife to walk you through what a hospital transfer would look like and how they can or cannot continue to support you. While I understand if you're planning for a home birth or a birth center, the last thing you may want to think about is having to transfer to a hospital. But this is the difference between navigating that scenario confidently or feeling overwhelmed and like your plans for your birth have failed. The COVID-19 pandemic brought some of the most drastic changes to prenatal care and birth policies. Hospitals were requiring masks during labor. They limited visitors. In some extreme cases, partners or doulas couldn't even attend births. Changes in hospital policies affected a lot of mothers who had babies during the pandemic, and not all mothers were prepared for those changes. An analysis of birth plan alterations in response to COVID-19 found overall that 45% of participants reported changing some aspect of their birth plans because of COVID-19. Now, I know, thankfully, the pandemic is long over, and hopefully we don't have another global pandemic. But if there's an event that changes hospital policies and procedures, you need to consider that when planning your birth. In the case of COVID-19, policies changed often and they varied widely between different venues and different locations. Hopefully, no natural disasters or nothing else crazy comes up before you're giving birth. But if there is a scenario like that, you need to be thinking about how that could potentially affect your labor and birth options. To create a backup birth plan, you're going to go through the same process that you do to create your ideal birth plan. At a minimum, if you're planning a vaginal birth, you should have a backup plan if you need a cesarean. This is going to allow you to maintain autonomy on your choices, and it's going to give you confidence in handling any scenario. So once you write your primary birth plan, you're just going to repeat steps 1 through 10 to write a backup plan. Hopefully, this is something that you never need to use, but you're going to be more confident going into labor knowing that you've prepared for multiple scenarios. In helping thousands of expecting parents create birth plans, there's a couple questions that come up all the time. One is, does your birth plan have to be written? There are several reasons why you should have a physical written birth plan. One is, seeing all your preferences in one place can help you to make sure that everything fits together and that there are no conflicts. Having a plan in writing is also going to ensure that when you review it with your care provider, you're going over every aspect of it, that you're not skipping anything. A written plan is going to give your partner or anyone else that's going to help support you during labor a Cliff Notes version of what you want. And during your labor, especially if you're in a hospital setting, you're going to have support staff there that you've never met. So there's going to be nurses, doctors, or other medical staff that you don't have a relationship with. So they don't know you, they don't know what your preferences are. Rather than explaining everything and risking leaving out any essential details, you can hand them a physical copy of your plan. Yes, you should have a written out birth plan. Another question that comes up a lot is, can your birth plan be longer than 1 page? I mentioned you're going to give copies of your birth plan to support staff that comes up during your labor. Nurses, doctors, hospital staff, they are very busy and they have other patients. No one wants to spend a long time sifting through several pages of requests. Not only are they going to miss some of the things that you've listed, but they may miss some of the items that are really important to you. While you may be able to fill up 5 pages with things that you want during your birth, spreading your attention over that many things is not going to be as effective as narrowing your focus to a shorter list. Another reason that you should cut your birth plan down to 1 page is that unfortunately, some providers are not big fans of you having a birth plan. If you do come across a doctor or a midwife or a nurse or somebody who's not thrilled about being handed a birth plan, It's going to be a lot better to just hand them one page than to hand them several pages that they now need to take the time to read. Hopefully, anyone that you're giving a copy of your birth plan to is very receptive to it. But if there's somebody that's not thrilled about being handed a birth plan, it's going to be a lot easier to just have one page to read than to have a stack of pages that they have to go through. A lot of expecting parents have a hard time condensing their birth plan to one page. So I have some tips for this. You can shorten your birth plan by taking out duplicate information and information or requests that are not necessary. Think about, are there some things that align with your care provider's routine practice that you don't need to mention? So if it's important for you to delay cord clamping, if it's your doctor or midwife's practice to delay and to not clamp the cord immediately, you may be able to take that out of your birth plan. Of course, the flip side of that is that if another doctor or midwife ends up attending your birth, that could be something that you want to make sure that they're aware of. As you're reviewing your birth plan and condensing it down to one page, look for things that may not be necessary. So an example of this could be if you want to have access to a birthing ball during your labor. That's something that's going to come up early on in your labor, and it's a quick request to ask a nurse for a birthing ball. That's probably not something that you need to include in your birth plan. You can also condense related items into one sentence or paragraph. For example, if you're mentioning erythromycin and vitamin K, those are both procedures that are done to newborns shortly after birth. You may be able to combine those two things into one sentence rather than having two separate sentences. Also, when you create a backup plan, that's going to allow you to move a lot of items to a separate birth plan and to keep both of them short. If you're still having trouble cutting it down to one page, I understand altering margins or spacing or making the font smaller may fix your issue if you're barely over one page. But if you condense the font size, the margins too much, it's going to be very obvious that you're squeezing way more than one page of text onto a single page. If you've done all of these things and your birth plan is still more than one page and you just can't possibly cut it down, I would move the more critical items and the things that are most important to you to the top. You know that there's a lot of resources from the Pregnancy Podcast to assist you in creating and writing your birth plan. There are episodes that examine the evidence on every intervention during labor and birth. If you want to browse those episodes, I recommend checking out the episode guide on the Pregnancy Podcast website. You can see that at pregnancypodcast.com/guide. And of course, if you're a Pregnancy Podcast Premium member, you have access to the entire back catalog, and all of that content is ad-free. If you want to see my birth plan, I'm more than happy to send it to you. You can request a copy at pregnancypodcast.com/birth plan. You'll get a copy of the plan that I created for my first birth, which was at a birth center. I also had a backup plan in the event that I was transferred to a hospital. So when you request a free copy of that, you'll get both of those birth plans. Of course, your preferences may be different than mine, but at least it can give you a sample of how a birth plan could be structured and worded. There's also the Your Birth Plan book. That walks you step by step to create your birth plan. There's short sections with evidence-based information to help you sort out your preferences. There's sample plans for everything from a home birth to a planned cesarean and everything in between. Plus, there's a master template that includes everything you could include in your birth plan, and it's super quick and easy to just customize it to fit your preferences. And if you're a Pregnancy Podcast Premium member, you get access to a free copy of the Your Birth Plan book. If you're not a premium member, it's available on Amazon, or you can purchase an instantly downloadable PDF. And one last thing before I wrap up this episode, you must work with your doctor or midwife when you're creating your birth plan. The number one reason birth plans fail is that expecting parents don't collaborate with their care providers when they're creating their birth plans. It's not enough to hand your doctor a piece of paper when you arrive at the hospital. It's going to be very challenging to get the birth experience that you want without the support of your doctor or midwife. In fact, it may be impossible. They're your trusted partner during pregnancy and birth. and you want their input and their expertise as you're crafting your plan. The more support that you have from your doctor or midwife, the closer you're going to get to your ideal birth experience. To recap today's episode, we talked about what a birth plan is, when you should be working on this, and when it should be done. We went through 10 steps to craft your birth plan. We talked about having a backup plan and why that is important, and some alternative scenarios that you should be planning for. We also went through some frequently asked questions, like, does your birth plan really have to be written out, or can it be longer than one page? And talked about some additional resources on the Pregnancy Podcast that you can use as you're crafting your plan. I want to thank you for tuning into the Pregnancy Podcast today. I hope that you find this episode helpful. If you have a friend who's pregnant, please share this episode if you think that they would appreciate it. A lot of listeners find the podcast through recommendations, and I love when you share it. As always, you can contact me, Vanessa, at pregnancypodcast.com. You can read the full article and all of the resources that accompany this episode at pregnancypodcast.com/plan. If you're looking for more evidence-based information, or you just want an ad-free experience, check out Pregnancy Podcast Premium. Premium members get access to every single episode of the podcast, and you never hear ads. Check it out at pregnancypodcast.com/premium.